What's up, Taboo listeners? This is Ashley Rodriguez with another episode of Taboo Talks featuring my husband, Melchor, who has nothing to say. He's just smiling at me. We're gonna bleep that out. So, today I wanted to talk to you guys about, drum roll please, age of majority. So why is it that 18 years old is considered our legal age to do anything, whether it is joining the military without parental consent, buying cigarettes, etc., owning a home, buying lottery tickets? You guys get the deal. So I started doing some research. Apparently I'm not the only one that has questioned this. Also, guys, I'm in the car, so if it's a little loud, that's why. I'll use a little bit of noise removal magic to make these extra noises go away. And I'm also a little bit congested. Thank you, wintertime in Georgia, for allowing me to catch this wonderful virus, aka, I think it's a cold. Back to my point, though. So, I started researching. The age of majority is what I found out that is the actual correct term for legal age or adulthood, which is not to be confused with age of consent. So the age of consent, it varies by state. I'm not going to go through all 50 states, but I will throw some links in the description that reference some articles I read, and those will go more into detail about specific states and their ages of consent. Excuse me. Where it would be consent to have sex, consent for, their living arrangements if parents are divorced or separated by the age of 12. In most states, a 12-year-old is considered old enough to make that decision for where they want to live. I also found out that at one point, several years ago, the U.S. actually decided to lower the drinking age from 21 years old to 18 years old, and there were very specific groups that lobbied against that and insisted that the age be raised back to 21 years old because statistics showed the majority of drunk driving related car accidents were ages 18 to 20 years old. So after a short time of the drinking age legally being 18 years old, the U.S. Congress passed the law stating that the age needed to be 21 years old, and then gave them the option that if they decided not to raise the drinking age legally to 21 years old, that the government would have no part in helping restore and maintain the public roads and systems. So therefore, most states, if not all of them at this point, have a legal drinking age of 21 so that they can receive the necessary help to maintain roads from their government, state, etc., etc. So aside from drinking alcohol and, joining the military, buying a home, things like that, I really wanted to dig into why they considered, or whoever passed this age of majority law considered 18 to be the legal age of adulthood. And what I found is that the age of adulthood has always, since we've established a voting system, been tied to suffrage, which is the right to vote. And back in the day, I'm not exactly sure on the years. You'll have to definitely read those links that I'm going to send in the description because I'm in a car and don't have access to all of my notes right now like I normally do. But somewhere in the 1900s, the age of suffrage was 21 years old. So you had to be 21 years old to vote, and therefore 21 years old to be a legal adult. Where that became an issue was when World War II and the Korean War and all of these wars kicked off, and 18-year-olds were able and were drafted into the war. So the public had an outcry, thought that it was wrong that young adults, 18 years old, could be drafted into war but couldn't even vote. They didn't even have the right to vote. Side note, just realized as I'm talking to you guys right now that women didn't always have the right to vote. So were we ever considered adults? Did we even have an age of adulthood? That's an interesting question. I'll have to look that up some more. If you guys know the answer, feel free to drop it in the comments below or send a message and learn me something. Here's where things get really weird, right? Because if you look at other countries that have parliaments and kings and queens, things like that, these individuals can come into power or their adulthood as early as the age of 5. And it has been done before where 5-year-olds were able to sign legal and binding contracts because they were the next of kin for power or authority, what have you, in their population or their culture. So that's an interesting note to make as well, that this isn't every culture. You know, this is an American thing or a westernized thing where there is an age of majority or an age of adulthood at a specific age that is tied to our voting rights. Then another important thing we have to look into is with the age of consent being 12, as early as 12 years old for some states. This includes sex or marriage. And obviously in other cultures, this is very different because you have child brides and things like that. It's kind of, I guess, where do we get our reasoning for when it is appropriate to have sexual relations or to have a child? Obviously, hundreds of years ago or however long ago, there were what we consider to be kids and very young teenagers naturally having kids and starting a family at a very young age because societally that was considered appropriate. You started at a young age, you know, married at a young age, and began your family in which you would have multiple kids because the mortality rate was higher back then, and you relied on a large family to keep the home system going, whether it was a farm or a family-owned business, things like that. So now it's a little tricky because you have the age of consent being as early as 12, but you have the age of majority where you can literally legally do anything else being the age of 18 in most states. There are, I believe if I remember correctly, 3 states where the age of majority is a little bit higher. I think it was Alabama, Mississippi, and somewhere else, where the ages were 19 to 21 being the legal age of adulthood. Then, if you want to get into legal issues, you know, or crimes, you have the potential to be tried as an adult, depending on your age and the severity of the crime. So I guess my main question for those of you out there who have more knowledge on this, I just have questions. I love to ask questions. I love to question society and why we do the things that we do, why we believe the things that we believe. If you've listened to any of the previous episodes on Taboo Talks, then you know that. I want to spark conversation and, you know, discuss these topics in a healthy and productive way. So I'm very curious, why is it that it is inappropriate for young women and girls and men, you know, whatever, to have sexual relations, get pregnant? You know, is it because societally that's not where we're at anymore? We're more independently functioning, where people are having children later in life, or because things have changed so drastically that it's very hard to be successful? Is it because in our minds we're so used to 18 years old being the age of majority or the legal age of adulthood that we can't fathom anything else? You know, so these are my questions. Is why is teenage pregnancy so looked down upon, so shunned? I had my first kid I was turning 24 when I had her. So I was not a teen pregnancy, but I do have these questions because I have a lot of family members, including my own mom, who had me at a very young age. And same with my family members have, you know, all been able to successfully have and start their family at a younger age. So I do have these questions of, what's considered appropriate, and if we do consider, a certain age to be appropriate for having kids or inappropriate, is it because societally we've been taught that, or because scientifically, it's more appropriate? I did go and do some research where they looked at the female body, and even though our age of reproduction is a very early age, just FYI, possibly TMI, I started my menstrual when I was 10 years old. Now, just because my body was ready to produce and make a child doesn't necessarily mean that my body physically, like the structure of my body, was ready. And so doctors have argued that our hips are more narrow. They haven't spread out until late teenage years for the hormones. Our hormones will cause our body to change and become more and more ready for reproduction. But in other cultures, again, and even back in the day of our own culture, early or young pregnancies were a thing. So I kind of just wanted to bring into question this entire concept of age and, the age of consent, which is sexually related, and, decisions like where you're going to live if you have split families, things like that. Then there's age of majority, which would be your voting and joining the military, owning a home, your legal age where you are able to provide and take care of your own persons. And then you have the legal drinking age of 21, which again scientifically is irrelevant because our brains are not fully developed until our early 20s to mid 20s. So even at the age of 21, one could argue that it would still be too early, and that alcohol could severely affect the growth and understanding, of our reasoning and stuff as we mature. So, like I said, there's a beep because he left the keys, or he took the keys out of the car. Okay, back to what I was saying. So all I wanted to do with this episode is kind of question the age thing. I really am interested in hearing your guys' response to this, your opinions, or even your education. If you guys have studied this or you have an interest in this as well, please reach out because I want to hear from you, and we will probably do a follow-up episode down the road, actually featuring some of you, because I do want to hear your opinions and your reasoning behind it. I think it's an interesting topic, because who says that 18, is the age of majority, and that, at 18, you should just know what the fuck you're supposed to do with your life and, be an adult. So obviously it's up to our parents or guardians and the people that we come into contact with as we grow up to help mold us into this adult by the age of 18. But a lot of people are kicked out, and especially if you look at like the foster care system and the orphan system, when it comes to homeless children, once they reach that age of majority, that 18 years old, I'm sure and I hope that they have resources, but a lot of them go from being a homeless child to a homeless adult because they're kicked out of the system, they've aged out of the system, and they are no longer considered a child, even if they didn't have that room to develop. So it is kind of tricky because there's a lot of things that I feel I was prepared or ready for at a younger age than 18. I was fortunate enough to be able to move out at the age of 17 and was semi-successful. I did move back in, I think, twice with my mom for a total of maybe 6 months. So a couple months at a time. One was after I left college, and another was, after I graduated high school, and another was after I left college right before I joined the military. So those were a few years apart, and it was, just a temporary thing because it didn't make sense for me to sign an entire lease on an apartment just to leave shortly after for the military. Oh my goodness. That car was taking off. You guys probably heard that in the background. But yeah, so please reach out to me, guys. I really am interested in hearing your thoughts on this subject. It's not necessarily a controversial subject if you look at it in terms of individuals not being, a child. I'm not sitting here saying like endorse child pornography or, child marriages, child brides, what have you. But I am saying that, what is it that determines, hey, this is a child, or hey, this is an adult? Because like I said, in many cultures and many countries, the ages are very, very different. Even my own grandmother, my Lola, she is Filipino, or was Filipino. She has since passed. But she was even married off at a young age, at the age of 13, if I remember correctly from the stories that I was told growing up. She was married out at a young age and had a child to an older man. And that was very, very normal. It was traumatic for my grandmother. She did end up leaving. But as far as the culture went and the society went, that was a very normal thing. And she went on to have a successful life, and everything was good. So even though it was a traumatic experience for her, that was something that was seen as appropriate or normal for the culture that she was in at the time that she was in. I will post on Instagram and the Taboo Talks Facebook page. I really want to get some insight from you guys, and let's have a healthy conversation about this. Let's talk about it. Obviously, sex is already a taboo topic. If you think about it, just even with grown-ass adults, we don't even like talking about sex sometimes. And then to think about it being somebody that's under the age of 18, even though the legal age of consent in many states is 12 years old. So let's talk about it. When I was doing some research, it did say that even though somebody at the age of 12 is legally able to consent to have sex, or to move and live with a guardian if they're in a split household or whatnot, it doesn't mean that there can't be problems out of it. It doesn't mean that prosecutions can't be made. It just means that if somebody really has an issue with it, they have the option to pursue a prosecution and make something happen from that situation. So again, we have a short cast, pretty short episode, but I just wanted to give you guys some information on the research that I was doing. I'll share those links with you in the description, and then definitely on this episode, more so than the other ones, I want to have a conversation and get out there and see what you guys think, and let's talk about it, because there's going to be a lot of individuals from different cultures. If you can step outside of the Western mindset and let's really figure this out, from a moral kind of compass, what's going on here. And like I said, if you guys have any extensive special knowledge on this subject, I would love, love, love to hear from you. And maybe we can get an interview together. So thanks again for listening, guys. I think we're on episode 8 now, so things are rolling. We have our launch coming up shortly, just a few days from now. So we have a week to go, and we're going to have a ton of prizes to give out. So make sure you guys are on board and mark your calendars for that. I am excited to talk with you guys, see you guys, and interact with you for that launch and for this episode specifically. So it's about that time. We're about 8 episodes in. We're going to get those conversations going and see where everybody is kind of at and, learn how to conversate. So thanks again, guys. My name is Ashley Rodriguez. I am sorry that I am congested today. This weather has me going crazy. But if you can handle my voice for this episode, that's another reason I'm going to keep it short. I just want to say thank you. And I'm also saying a million times, so I apologize for that too. But yeah, I'll see you guys next week. This is Taboo Talks.